Okay, so this is probably going to take a series of videos, but we're going to talk now since Napoleon has instituted reforms, since he has appeased the relationship between France and the church. We're going to see how he turns towards conquest. It's pretty common when you have established an empire to ultimately try to expand it in order to protect it. So before we actually get into war and conquest, let's just talk about what kind of signals the transition of Napoleon's rule from a consulate into an empire. So in December of 1804, Napoleon is going to crown himself hereditary emperor of France. So of course the word hereditary implying that his children would take his place. So I mean ultimately we see a restoration of a monarchy just with a new family, no longer with Bourbons. All right, and one of the reasons actually why he crowned himself emperor was because there still was a possibility that the Bourbons could be restored to the throne. Now, of course, Louis XVI is dead, but he has children. So this is really Napoleon's way of kind of securing his power rather than being replaced by someone else. So, ultimately, if we see opposition to Napoleon rise up, by crowning himself, he feels more secure that that ultimately no one's going to replace him. All right, and ultimately, why do we transition from a consulate into an empire? Well, Napoleon argued that an empire was necessary for France to maintain but also expand its influence throughout Europe. So, kind of the way to extend revolutionary principles is to make other countries join you, to make France bigger. Um, and just like some of the revolutionaries thought when they were at previous wars throughout Europe. Sorry, I accidentally paused that. So anyway, I think I was right around where I was saying that Napoleon feels that he is a liberator. So basically, he feels like he's actually freeing foreign people from the absolute rulers who oppress them. So again, this is a way that Napoleon can argue that he is spreading revolutionary principles and actually helping people in other countries. The idea that expanding France is actually going to expand liberty along with it. But we're going to see that eventually this is going to turn against him when he starts to conquer and dominate other countries. And we're going to see that he also, even countries that he does not actually control directly, he's going to appoint some of his relatives onto the throne. So, because he's trying to control so many areas of Europe, eventually this is going to kind of unleash nationalism against him. Okay, so people in these countries don't like the fact that Napoleon is expanding his power, trying to control, so much of Europe. So eventually we're going to see that kind of turn against him and result in Napoleon's downfall. All right, so the Grand Empire. All right, so we're going to examine how Napoleon gains additional territory. So by 1805, Napoleon is engaged in constant warfare. Okay, and I'm going to show you a map as the next slide, but what you're going to see is Napoleon's empire is going to be the largest since the Roman Empire, although that's going to be much more temporary under Napoleon. This empire is going to start to shrink and we're going to see France's original borders restored by 1814. So France is going to extend all the way to the Rhine, including Belgium, Holland, the German coast, up to the Western Baltic, and also parts of the Italian coast. So actually, you see all this stuff. It's going to be in your notes. Let's actually get a visual of what's going on here. So like I just said, see how the borders of France have extended. So the Rhineland now is going to be controlled by France. All right, also Belgium and Holland are in there. That's all going to be part of France. Okay, we see how much of the German coast is now part of France. All right, and then we're also going to see down along the Western European coast, that's all going to belong to France. And also they get part of they also get part of this this region here, which is a little bit farther to the east, and will actually, I mean, basically this is the Illyrian provinces here, so that's also going to be part of France, all right? And even these areas that he does not control, we're going to see how he might be able to rule them indirectly. All right, so also we're going to see that there are dependent satellite kingdoms. So even if Napoleon doesn't directly control them, he's going to put his appointees on the throne. All right, this happens in the Confederation of the Rhine here. Okay, this also happens in Spain. Napoleon's going to put his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the throne of Spain. In Westphalia, which we can see here, that he's going to place his youngest brother, Jerome, on the throne of Westphalia. Before Holland was incorporated into France, um, Napoleon is going to put his brother Louis on the throne of Holland. All right, but then he incorporates Holland into France. And then also in the Italian provinces, he's going to put his sister on the throne at Naples. His stepson is going to rule Lombardy, Venice, and the Papal States. All right, so to a certain extent, you can see even though he's extending his influence over all these areas, he is trying to impose some revolutionary principles, like he abolishes feudalism, um, and he reforms social, political, and economic structures. Um, he was afraid, though, that if he completely unified Italy, it might threaten his influence, which is why he puts different people on these thrones. All right, also, as another satellite kingdom is the Grand Duchy of Warsaw out here. Um, and then look at all these other countries that are independent, so they're not directly controlled by France, but they still become allies. Okay, so we're going to see Austria, Prussia, and Russia as the major allies. Eventually, though, this map is a little late, okay, because this Russia actually is shown as one of France's enemies. By 1805 or so, Russia was allied with France, so don't be confused. This map is a little bit later. Okay, so what wars does Napoleon go to? So we're going to see a third coalition forming. Um, and basically what Napoleon is trying to do is invade Great Britain, all right? And we're going to see various countries side up with Britain against France. All right, so first, Austria is going to sign an alliance with Britain in 1805. And then the coalition is going to be completed once Russia joins them and Sweden joins them. All right, Russia is going to be under the rule of Alexander I, who's also Catherine the Great's grandson. We're going to talk about the importance of Russia in a little while. Basically, they feel like, especially Napoleon's conquest of Italy, was really concerning Russia and Austria. They thought that Napoleon was going to be a threat to the balance of power. Remember how in so many previous wars, like uh, the War of Spanish Succession, for example, the fear was that one country might become more powerful than all these other countries. So in the War of Spanish Succession, we also saw a series of countries ally together, in this case also against France. We're going to see the same thing kind of happen with the Third Coalition. Their main goal is to stop Napoleon from gaining additional territory and influence. All right, so we're going to see a couple of very important battles in the War of the Third Coalition. The Battle of Trafalgar might be it's definitely very famous in the sense that, at least in this instance, we're going to see a major British victory. All right, so this is when France is attempting to invade Great Britain. However, the French and Spanish fleets, Spain was still allied with France at this point, they are completely destroyed by the British Navy, also under the command of Lord Horatio Nelson. We saw him in some of the conflicts earlier in Egypt. All right, and what this is going to do is it's going to make the British Navy supreme up until the beginning of World War I, which is really significant. It's also going to make it so that France can no longer feasibly invade Britain. All right. Also, kind of as a side note, Lord Horatio Nelson, even though he dies in this battle, he becomes one of the great military heroes in English history. All right, the second important battle, and it turns in a different direction, it turns in France's favor, okay, is the Battle of Austerlitz, which is in December of 1805. And in this instance, France sees a victory because Alexander I, who was Tsar of Russia, is actually going to pull his troops out of the battle. All right, and when he does this, this puts France at the advantage, and France is going to win. And what happens is that Austria is going to lose significant territory because they want to establish peace with France. So they're basically willing to lose some of their land so that this conflict ends. This is going to signal the collapse of the Third Coalition, but we have to talk about the kind of peace treaty that they established. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. All right, but this victory is marked by an important landmark in Paris. All right, so basically, what this battle, what Austerlitz signifies, is that Napoleon now is really master of Western and Central Europe. He's got territory in Austria, he's got territory in the Rhine, he's got territory in Belgium, Holland, parts of Italy, the Illyrian provinces. His empire is expanding rapidly. So when he wins in the Battle of Austerlitz and gets a little piece of Austria, he decides to commemorate his victory. And he does that by commissioning the construction of the Arc de Triomphe, which, if any of you have been to Paris or seen pictures of Paris landmarks, you probably recognize this structure here. All right, and the reason why the Arc de Triomphe is interesting is because his architecture is harkening back to the Roman Empire, when Caesars would build arches to signify their victory. So basically, Napoleon is kind of emphasizing that he is building this empire, just like Rome built one in its day. All right, so we're going to see that that when they sign a peace treaty to end the War of the Third Coalition, France is going to be that much stronger. This is a really this is like the height of Napoleon's conquest in a lot of ways. Okay, so provisions of the treaty. We're going to see that Prussia actually loses a ton of its land to France, and with it, half of its population. All right. Also, Russia is going to accept the fact that Napoleon is going to be reorganizing Western and Central Europe, which we're going to talk about in a little while with the Confederation of the Rhine. That's his reorganization of those territories. We're also going to see that Russia is agreeing to accept Napoleon's continental system. We're going to talk about that in a little while. It's kind of a blockade against England that ultimately fails. Like I was saying earlier, basically this treaty is going to show kind of the height of Napoleon's success. All right. Now, France and Russia are actually going to ally with one another. All right. When Russia pulls out of Austerlitz, and Russia accepts Napoleon's reorganization of Central Europe, it also becomes France's ally, which is interesting because it was part of the Third Coalition. But remember, sometimes these countries ally with France because they believe that it is to their advantage. All right, so basically, because Alexander of Russia kind of recognizes that Napoleon is dominating Western Europe, he feels that it is in Russia's best interest to actually join France. If you can't beat him, join him, as they say. All right, we're going to see France is also going to be occupying Berlin, and it's going to be controlling most of Western Germany, which signals us towards the reorganization of Germany. All right, so basically, once France has defeated so much of this area, so it's defeated Prussia and Austria. All right, it decides to take. Remember how under the Holy Roman Empire we had 300 different independent states within that relatively small territory? What Napoleon's going to do is he's going to consolidate it. All right, so he's going to make it far less than those 300 states. It's going to be called the Confederation of the Rhine, and it's going to turn into 15 different states. But Austria, Prussia, and Saxony are not included. All right, so it's going to be just these other territories kind of in between. All right, so we're going to see that the many of the tinier German states are going to be abolished, and they're going to make their way into those 15 different German states. This traditionally marks the end of the Holy Roman Empire, although we've been seeing it weaken for quite some time. All right, so actually some members of the Confederation of the Rhine had kind of seceded from this area at this point, and we're going to see that a new kingdom is going to be created in Westphalia. It's created out of Prussian territories west of the Elbe River. Also, again, when Napoleon reorganizes Germany, he's trying to establish some revolutionary principles. He's not trying to be all bad, right? So he abolishes feudalism in these areas, and he carries out other reforms. All right, now, you might say, oh, well, if he's spreading Enlightenment principles, maybe people in this area in Germany are going to be responsive and maybe excited about Napoleon's control. Basically, like I was saying at the very beginning of this lecture, what we're going to see instead happen is that because Napoleon is kind of trying to dominate and repress these German states by ruling over them, It's going to kind of awaken German nationalism, and eventually they are going to turn against him. We'll continue with the continental system next time.